So welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to get logged in, get settled, and then we'll get started. Everybody's probably sitting down with their lunch or getting ready for lunch. I don't know. So we're going to have a nice conversation, either over lunch or right before lunch. Well, I guess we can get started. Welcome, and again, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We're very excited to have Jeff Warren joining us for our session. My name is Jim. For those who do not know me, I'm the vice chair of the ARMA Board of Directors, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items. We want to thank you for being a valued member of ARMA, joining us today. From online education and industry opportunities, we certainly encourage you to connect and gain professional resources through your membership. And if you're not an ARMA member, I highly encourage you to visit arma.org to see all that ARMA has to offer. So on to some FAQs. We get this question a lot. Everyone's burning question: will today's webinar be recorded? Well, of course it will. And all professional members will receive access to the recording and the slides. Of course, too, please check your emails for a follow-up from Zoom in the next 1 to 2 business days for additional details and access. And finally, we want to say thank you to our sponsor, Netwrix. I want to take a minute to thank today's speaker and sponsor for their support of ARMA and our community. We certainly couldn't bring education, programming, and events without the support of our business partners. So we certainly hope you're selecting services and product for your business, and you consider business partners like Netwrix who support you. Well, now I have the honor of introducing Jeff. Now, Jeff brings over a decade of experience in product management and development to the Netwrix team. Prior to joining Netwrix, Jeff was responsible for leading the product organization at Stealthbits Technologies, where he helped develop innovative enterprise-scale security solutions. Jeff serves as a CTO across the entire Netwrix product portfolio in order to offer innovative, effective, and practical solutions to today's security problems. So at this point, I'll kick it off to Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And it's great to be here, everyone. So like Jim mentioned, my name is Jeff Warren, CTO at Netwrix. I've been working in the data security field for about 15 years. And today I wanted to share some of my experiences there, specifically around how do you approach data security in the world we live in today, which is a multi-cloud landscape. So as you begin to adopt more cloud services, how do you put data security practices front and center when you're designing those practices? So I thought we'd start with just a look at a few key metrics to put this in perspective, right? So some big numbers. We'll start with 187, and that is the number of applications that enterprises use on average. This comes from a study done by Okta. So Okta provides single sign-on capabilities. They track what applications enterprises are connecting to. And on average, they're managing almost 200 applications through Okta. So if you can imagine that, each one of those is storing a variety of different types of data, internal, external, and has its own security model taken into account. And that also does not account for data that is not connected through single sign-on through the Okta portal, like a lot of your file sharing and other file storage devices. So 187, there's a lot of data out there in a lot of different places. The second number is 2,000. That's how many terabytes of data a business on average is generating per day. So not only is this data spread out in a variety of places, it's growing at the fastest rate we've ever seen. And it's going to continue to accelerate that growth. So now you have more data in more places than ever, And the last statistic, 102, that is the number of minutes on average it takes an attacker to move laterally through your organization once they compromise a single system, a single device. So from the time an employee might get phished or a vulnerability gets exploited on your workstations or public cloud infrastructure, less than 2 hours, that attacker has compromised privileged credentials and moved laterally into the core of your business. And from there, they're able to begin perpetration of ransomware, data exfiltration, other types of advanced persistent threats. So, if you look at all three of these together, now it's more important than ever to secure your data. It's spread out as you rapidly adopt more services, more cloud applications, more storage repositories. It's growing faster than ever. And you're under greater attack from adversaries with more efficiency than we've seen in the past. Now, let's talk a little bit about multi-cloud environments and what exactly that means. Well, for many of us and many organizations, this is their reality. 54% of workloads are expected to be in the cloud this year and continuing to grow. 97% of organizations are managing a hybrid environment. So at least a good portion of their data is in the cloud. You might be running on-prem and cloud together. You might have your own private data centers. Either way, there's a variety of data repositories spread out across your on-prem and cloud infrastructure. And you can see a 75% measured growth in multi-cloud adoption if you look at the same Okta reports. So more customers are becoming multi-cloud. And multi-cloud means you're using multiple service providers for your cloud infrastructure. So it might be a combination of the three big ones you see there: AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. It could be Oracle, it could be others. But for one reason or another, many organizations find themselves managing multiple cloud providers. That could be because you acquired a company that had AWS when you were standardized on Azure. It could be different teams are implementing services because they want to use the best AI toolkit that Azure has to offer for a particular application. Maybe you want to avoid licensing and other challenges with being completely dependent on one vendor. So you want to spread it out a little bit or have better disaster recovery scenarios in place. Either way, we all find ourselves in this current situation of managing multiple clouds, and this introduces some challenges. How do you manage your data and your workloads in these different clouds? How do you develop the internal skills? Just because you know Azure doesn't mean you can easily learn the ins and outs of AWS or Google. So you need the right skills to manage these different environments. And you have to keep up with the cost, the licensing, and all the changes that continue to evolve. If you keep up with all the updates, these systems, these platforms are introducing new services pretty rapidly, and it can be tough to stay on top of. And then on the data side, it introduces a lot of challenges. Today, we're focused on talking about data security. And if you look at this, these are some of the challenges we're going to unpack today. How do you discover your data? How do you classify what's sensitive versus what's not? How do you understand who has access to what? What are they doing with it? Is it secured properly, or is it exposed to the entire internet? And how do you provide the necessary compliance reporting and data privacy visibility on top of all of that, so you can adhere to all the necessary regulatory compliance standards? It can be a daunting task. And moreover, the cloud provider is not really there to help you too much with that. This is examples of the shared responsibility models from Microsoft and Amazon. And every cloud provider has their own, and they basically all say the same thing, which is they're responsible for providing a reliable cloud platform with the right services, but you, the customer, you're responsible for keeping your data secure. You have the accountability for information protection. So the tools might be there, but it's up to you to use them responsibly and in the right way. And just because you put data in the cloud, even if it's in AWS or Azure, does not mean it's going to be secure. So I thought it might be useful to illustrate a specific example and go a few levels deeper here. If you look at one particular challenge that you might be facing, let's look at data classification with a multi-cloud environment. So let's say you have AWS, Azure, Google, two of the three or all three. And your goal is to just find out what sensitive data is out there. Do you have intellectual property stored in S3 buckets and Azure files and in databases, RDS? Where is it? Is it properly protected? And who has access to it? So starting with discovering of what's out there is the key part. And if you look at the native capabilities provided by Azure or AWS or Google, they vary tremendously. And if you try to apply a uniform data security strategy across multiple cloud vendors, you might find yourself unable to do so because of the limitations or the disparity between the capabilities there. So for example, simple examples, information types, that means classifiers. So is it a credit card? Is it a driver's license? Are you operating in the EU? In which case you need to be able to identify EU citizen identifiers, UK passport numbers, whatever it might be. They all provide completely different sets of classifiers. AWS has around 100. Azure comes in at the top with over 300. But just looking for sensitive data means completely different things in each cloud provider. And they can scan different data in different ways. Azure can do OCR, Amazon can't. So that means optical character recognition, which is being able to scan images, which could be, if you're in the medical industry, x-rays, right? It could be key intellectual property as well. It could be blueprints. It could be scans of plans and designs. So if you can't cover OCR, you're going to have a big gap out there. And then what can you do once you find it? Can you mask? Can you label? Can you encrypt? They're all different. So as you start to put out your strategy, you're kind of held prisoner by what the native capabilities are, not to mention the licensing costs associated with each one to make sure you're using it responsibly. So you can see it may be easy to design a plan at the high level, but as you get into practice and you go at a few levels deeper, you might run into some obstacles and challenges. And in reality, no organization is just looking at one place. Most organizations have data spread out on-premise, in the cloud, in files, in databases, in applications. And it's not just classification you're ultimately going to care about or have to provide visibility into. It's permissions, entitlements, privileged access, configuration, and activity monitoring. So that's just one example on the classification side. But you can see as we go on today, some of the other challenges when you start to look beyond classification. So what's the best strategy? Where do you start? What are some of the challenges that might hamstring you along your journey to secure your cloud data? Well, I think when you look at the ideal strategy, we mentioned it starts with discovery. So discovering where you have data is obviously a pretty key part of the equation, because then you can move on to the next steps, which is understanding access. And we'll talk about some of those challenges. So where is my data? Then who has access to that data? So who could access it and how? And then being able to monitor that access. So who is accessing it, alert on anything that you need to notify your security team about, or that could require immediate attention, such as large data exfiltration events, unusual behavior, malicious changes, indicative ransomware patterns. And then moving on, you can start to operationalize your data security policies through applying classification, which could be labels and tags that can then feed into your DLP policies and overall protection strategy. And towards the end of the maturity model is where you can get into governance, which is more of an ongoing process to keep things secure. Once you've discovered, labeled, been able to monitor, now you can start to engage the business and periodically review access. You can put processes in place so people can request access when things are done inappropriately, immediately flag them and remediate them. So ongoing governance, and then integration is where you tie in your data security practice into other key parts of your organization, like your security operations center, which could be your SIM or your SOAR, your identity governance and administration. So you can get it tied into provisioning, deprovisioning, as a couple of quick examples, DLP as well. So that's the ideal flow. That's the ideal strategy, but it can't be that simple, right? And it's not. You're going to run into some challenges along the way. We touched on one a little bit. I'll illustrate further. Feature parity. As you look at the cloud vendors, what they can and can't support, it's shifting, and it can leave some gaps in your policies. Understanding access models, also one that I think customers that I've worked with maybe underestimate just how different and complicated these can be with the cloud. And then also, of course, end user adoption is key to any successful data security program. So let's take a quick look at an example of some of these specific challenges. We talked about data classification a couple levels deep. I wanted to go one level deeper. Some customers are focusing on Azure with E3 or E5 licenses. And if you're planning to put all of your data in Azure, there's some good features there that you can take advantage of. One of the newer introductions into the data security offering there, which is technically data governance, is called Microsoft Purview, which comes with information protection. So this has been renamed and relabeled a few times over the years, but ultimately a key part of this is the ability to find your sensitive data with those 300 plus classifiers and apply labels, sensitivity labels to the files. So then you know where your sensitive data is, and you can put policies, rules, protections around it. So sounds good. It's a great concept, good idea. But one thing that is often overlooked until you're halfway down that road is some of the limited support that this offers. If you look at just an example of some of the file type support that I listed out there, you can view this on Microsoft's website as well. If you look at things such as archive files, zip files, 7-zip files, most of those are unsupported. So if somebody takes sensitive data, compresses it and puts it in a zip file, it can go undetected. But that's a very easy way for somebody to package up and exfiltrate data from within your organization. So not having that labeled can be quite an oversight, as well as database files, emails, multimedia, image files. So there's a lot of sensitive data that can slip through the cracks because of some of the limitations in file type support when you start getting into these data classification offerings like Purview information protection. And this is, of the cloud vendors, the most complete information protection offering. So just to give you a little bit of extra context, access models is the next challenge. So one of the things that I think is not given enough attention as organizations look to get their arms around cloud security, you might look at tools like cloud access brokers and other systems, but really understanding who has access to your data and how that access is configured is critically important, because that leaves a lot of backdoors, or we've seen with S3 buckets over the years, inappropriate permissions can open up your data to Google or AI now, where they can index and search your data, make it very accessible to the rest of the world. So these are critically important to securing your data. But if you look across all the different offerings, they all work totally differently. And you need to have a pretty good understanding of these if you're going to implement proper security. So the three examples shown here, you can see on the left is our AWS Identity and Access Management Policy. That is defined using JSON as the syntax. And you can see it allows a particular right to a particular user. It can restrict where they're coming from, where they're going to, a lot of different options that you can implement. But if you mistype or omit certain key settings, it can have a drastic effect on the security of the data that you're storing within your AWS resources, like your databases, your EC2 images, your S3 buckets, all managed by those IAM policies. So you need to have a decent understanding of how they work. Then you can go to some of your on-prem or cloud NAS or Azure files or other cloud storage that's more CIFS, NFS, and Samba protocol. And if you look at those and they're leveraging NTFS security, or you're using on-premise file sharing, we're probably all a little bit more familiar with some of these and how access control entries and access control lists work. But this is typically mapped to users, groups, and permissions. So a simpler list of who can do what, but we all know the devil in the details there is all of the nesting that lives within all of the groups and really trying to understand effective access of NTFS. So a different set of challenges when you're looking at NTFS. And then Azure has something called RBAC, so role-based access control. And this can be defined all layers of Azure at the resource group down to the individual resources. And it's intended to also provide more restrictive control over who can do what. But you do have to have understanding of your roles, or if you're doing attribute-based, your attributes, and that's going to tie into who can do what. On top of that, there's conditional access policies that can restrict your Azure RBAC based off of claims that the user has, like what device they're using. Is it a secure device provisioned by you, or is it a bring your own device? And in which case they may have different access. So all of these, just a few examples of how different access models work. And it may seem obvious, but I found most organizations we work with don't have a real good plan for how to normalize these and tie them into their policies. And then last is the end users, common mistakes there that can kind of poke some frustrating holes in your security policies. You can have mislabeling. A lot of the information protection, like Azure, it may rely on end users appropriately labeling files that they create on their desktop. And end users, I think, have been known to be notoriously bad at appropriately labeling files on their desktop. You can put some automation on top of it to look for patterns, but there's still a lot of this that happens manually. And if it's not appropriately labeled manually, it's not going to have the appropriate protections that go along with that label. So mislabeling is a common challenge. Also misconfiguring. You can see when you're sharing, there's some easy buttons that you can click that do risky things. That's a SharePoint Online screenshot of clicking the everyone except external users permission, which will open that up to exactly what it says, everyone in your organization except external users. And because SharePoint is search indexed, it makes it very easy to find the content of whatever you're sharing through a simple search term. And then last is the misplacing. That's an example of Google Drive and the Google Apps experience, where you can share it with others, or you can publish it to the web. So there may be more preferred secure ways to do things, but sometimes end users just want something quick that's going to work, and they end up putting it in the wrong location that's overly exposed. So training and policies can help prevent some of that. Which leads us to the next point, where do I start? What's some practical advice? Well, everyone's different. So the concept of today's webinar isn't targeting any specific vertical, any specific customer profile. So there's going to be some variance, and you have to start with what your drivers are. Ideally, security is going to be part of anyone's plan up front. But when you look at compliance, obviously that's different by industry. So if you're in healthcare, if you're in the government supply chain, if you're in financial industry, financial services, you're going to have different compliance regulations that are going to guide what level of security you need to achieve. So obviously laying out your key drivers is the first step. And then from there, you need to begin your planning, and inventorying your data is always a great place to start. There's tools like Azure has a data mapping tool. There's other data mapping tools out there. Even use a spreadsheet if you have nothing better, but do some discovery, do some inventorying, finding where your data is. Ideally using automated scanning tools, but sometimes you take what you can get. And from there, once you have as best of an inventory as possible, you can start to define policies, which would say, what are my information types? What are the classification levels? What do I want to do when certain things occur? What's allowed, what's not allowed? And that's governed by your overall security and compliance drivers. Then tech evaluation. You need to understand native technology, native capabilities versus third party. And that's really up to each organization and guided by the plan and the drivers. But you will see, like I said before, if you're looking for a ubiquitous strategy across multiple cloud vendors and on-prem, it's going to be hard to find using native controls, and you might end up finding yourself quite frustrated. And then, look for some quick wins, some key wins. Identify high risk conditions and shut them down first. That could be S3 buckets that are open to the internet. That could be external sharing links in Microsoft 365, where you're sharing data with users outside of your organization, or anonymous sharing links, where just a link is floating around and anybody that can click on it can read or edit the file. Find some of those really bad security things and go and undo them, fix them, remediate them, and get some key wins, because you can make significant strides in securing your data by just focusing on the highest risk configurations and focus on what matters most to you. Don't protect all data equally. Focus on identifying where your key data, your intellectual property, your customer data resides, and start there first. So now, just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Netwrix and where we fit in and how we play in this equation. So Netwrix, we've been in the data security space for over 15 years. We have over 13,000 customers across the globe using our solutions to solve problems like this. And this is what most of my career has been focused on, helping customers solve these problems. The proliferation of data and data sprawl, like we talked about earlier, whether it's cloud or whether it's adopting new technology, from files to databases, data lakes, the increasing regulations that are out there today, and the increased scrutiny that most organizations are under to stay compliant, avoid fines, and achieve security along the way. And then the increase in advancement of attacks like ransomware, where most people traditionally thought of ransomware as this encryption of your IT infrastructure, maybe something that was bulk blasted out there, hoping for unsuspecting victims to click or launch an executable. Now it's much different. It's much more human operated, targeting individual organizations with a much higher success rate and operating more of a low and slow and more difficult to detect fashion. So as ransomware has become more human operated and more commoditized with offerings like ransomware as a service, it's become more difficult to detect. And in addition, it's targeting your data more than ever now. It's not just after the encryption of your systems, it is extracting your data so it can extort you with that as well and threaten to post that data on a breach site unless the ransom is paid. So it's become a data security and a data privacy threat just as much as an attack on your critical IT infrastructure. And that's where, Netwrix comes in. We want to focus on helping customers secure your data, but doing it with a layered approach, having data security front and center, but then an equal focus on your identity security to avoid account compromise and misuse, and your infrastructure security, because that's often, if you look at this, the initial point of entry. So the way modern attacks work, they might get a foothold on an end user workstation, public cloud infrastructure through a vulnerability, wherever it is. And then you saw less than 2 hours to move laterally compromised credentials. We talked about that earlier. So that lateral movement technique uses weaknesses in your identity structure to go from an unprivileged user all the way to a domain admin or a global admin. And then from there, really there's nothing stopping an attacker from exfiltrating all of your data and then encrypting your systems, dropping ransomware, extorting your organization. So you need to look at each and every one of those. If all you did was focus on data security, like we were talking about earlier, somebody could still compromise an admin and bypass an admin account and bypass all those protections. So you need to have layered approach in place. And that is what we strive to help organizations do. Overcome these siloed approaches where you have different products that are each doing different things and not working together, providing end-to-end solutions. And we build solutions that are targeted towards all customer sizes. So products for organizations with 100 users up to 2 million users. Whether your data is on-prem, in the cloud, at the endpoint, helping you secure it. And this is a quick summary of what our product portfolio looks like. So you can see, and I'm going to get into a quick demo in a bit, how this looks. On the top left, we have our data security capabilities, which we call data classification and data access governance. So helping you find your sensitive data wherever it is and put process around it so that you can understand who has access, remove unnecessary access, achieve a principle of least privilege, and put that automation in place with governance. On the right is our identity security offering, where we can help you with full end-to-end management of your identities through IGA, Identity Governance and Administration. That is provisioning a new user into your organization, giving them the accounts they need, mapping those accounts to the roles for their particular job, helping as that user moves through the organization, adjusting their access, making that secure and automated, and then performing regular recertifications, access request workflows, automating the things that can help keep your employees with only the access they need to do their jobs. We also offer privilege access management, so focusing on your administrators first, making sure they're protected and provided access just in time. And that's one of the key trends we've also seen organizations moving to. Secure your data, secure your organization with just-in-time privilege, rather than having administrative accounts everywhere that can be used at any time with no process around it. Even if those passwords are being rotated, they're still sitting out there in targets for attackers. Moving to a just-in-time privilege approach can be highly impactful, and I'll show you that today in action. We focus on Azure and Active Directory security, making sure you understand what's there, who's doing what, identify threats that could weaken your Active Directory or compromise key accounts through things like Pass the Ticket, Golden Ticket, DC Sync, and then putting automation around Active Directory. And also password security, making sure you have secure passwords. You do not allow passwords in your environment that are in a breach dictionary, like have been pwned, that you can put a strong password reset process in place so that users can securely reset their passwords and enforce strong password requirements along the way. So all of that on the right can help you make sure your identity layer is secure, protected, and if there is any compromise of your identities, you know about it quickly and can respond. And then the bottom left is our infrastructure, which is helping you secure your workstations, your endpoints, and your servers, as well as your public cloud infrastructure. So making sure the privilege is appropriately configured, that there's baselines and understanding of how your systems are secured. It also aligns with standards like CIS or DCSTIG, and can identify when inappropriate configurations are made that might weaken your security posture. So all those working together helps you secure your data, your identity, and your infrastructure, providing that layered security approach we talked about. And you can see we can help you across the board, whether your data is on-prem in the cloud, in a database and application. We have the solutions to help you and the integrations with many of the tools that you might rely on today. So with that being said, I thought I'd give a quick demonstration of just a couple things you can do with our products to help secure your environment. And I'm moving over to my demo environment. Hopefully you can see. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Let's start with one of our products, Netwrix Auditor. So one challenge you might find yourself in early on, like we talked about, is discovery. What do I have out there? What's going on? Let me get my arms around this problem before I start to put policies in place. And that's what Netwrix Auditor can help you do. It provides a very intuitive, simple, easy way to connect to a variety of different platforms and get visibility into what's there, how is it secured, and monitor all of the activity to understand who's doing what. So this is my Netwrix Auditor installation, and you can see I've got a few different things going on. I'll show you my overview report here, but I'm monitoring my on-premise Active Directory. I'm monitoring my Azure Active Directory. I'm monitoring my file systems, my SharePoint, Teams. And you can see overall, most of my changes recently have been coming through Azure AD. They've been coming for Active Directory, SharePoint Online, who's making the changes, how often it's happened. I've got a spike this morning as I was getting this demo environment, spun up. And then you can drill into all of these, but I want to show just a couple other capabilities before I do that. One of the most valuable things is a simple search interface that lets you normalize all of the different activities that can happen on these different systems. So one of the things we talked about is all the different access models, the different way things work in Azure, in the cloud, on-prem. It can be complicated. So one of the key value propositions of Netwrix Auditor, especially for monitoring activity, is it takes all of these disparate logs, disparate activity events, and puts them into a very simple and easy to understand format. So now I can see what was changed by whom on what systems. So whether it's my Azure changes that have been made with all the details there, I can look at group changes here. I can see a user was added to a group from Azure AD. The member Barry was added to this group. I can see documents that were accessed in SharePoint Online. And you can customize this search with whatever it is you're looking for. So if you wanted to look for a specific user, a specific action, a specific location, time frame, or destination, you can filter this exactly the way you want to and get a simple report at your fingertips. In addition, it's going to give you a risk assessment. So as we go out and scan these different environments, it's going to bring back where your risk exists on the identity layer, where you have issues with passwords and user accounts, where you have risk with permissions and over provisioning, where your data might be exposed, your sensitive data might be exposed through everyone permissions or inappropriate sharing and links, and where your infrastructure might be at risk. So right away, you get a very nice posture view of how your data, identity, and infrastructure are set up. And then you can see out of the box countless reports to help you get visibility into all these different systems right at your fingertips. And one of the nice things that a lot of customers benefit from is compliance mapped reports. So if you're particularly focused on HIPAA, you can come and see all of the HIPAA reports mapped to the exact regulations that you need to care about for HIPAA compliance. So all of this puts data security at your fingertips, makes it very easy to use. You can see when you want to add a new plan, it walks you through a wizard, whether you want to secure Exchange Online, Azure AD, Teams, whatever it might be. Very, very simple to do. So Netwrix Auditor is one of the most powerful ways to gain visibility into this multi-cloud hybrid environment and get a single pane of glass view. Another thing I wanted to show is once you're ready, once you've done your discovery, you're ready to actually put some security in place. What can you do to be more proactive? And I wanted to highlight one of our products, Netwrix Privilege Secure, which is our privilege access management product. So just to show you in my environment, one sec, let me pull up my cloud environment. Because I have a mixture of Azure and AWS. So here's my AWS EC2. I've got a variety of servers that are running here. Most of these are Windows. I set up an Azure virtual machine that's running Linux here. So you might find yourself in a similar situation where you have all of these different virtual machines out there that you need to secure, that you need to give your administrators secure access to. They could be on-prem in a Hyper-V, a vSphere. They could be in the cloud and in a Azure AWS GCP. So what we're going to do is put some security around that and provide users with a single entry point into all of the systems that you want to give them access to, but put some policies on top of it to make sure everything's done securely. So, excuse me, I'm going to log in as a particular user. So it's going to prompt me with MFA, and you can see here, I'll copy my MFA code. And this is what your users could see. So a very filtered view of exactly what you want them to see. I've got the ability to connect to my Linux system in Azure. I've got my ability to connect to my domain controller in Windows on-prem. And I've got my EC2 Windows system, all right here. So the end user, they're not going to need to know the difference between how to access things the right way in Azure and AWS on-prem. They just need to go here. And in addition, you get all the extra security on top of it. You can see I was already prompted for MFA, and you can integrate that with your own MFA provider, but I just use the Authenticator app for simplicity. So I'll show you how this was configured by the administrator after, but let's just say I want to come in and I'm going to access this Linux server in Azure. So I'm going to create a session. I'm going to provide notes for what I want to do. I'm going to say, applying configuration changes for the application launch. Whatever the right notes is. There we go. And I'm going to start the session. So now, what's this doing in the background? My user, before doing this, I have no way to access this system. I can't bypass this. I have no account with access to this system. I don't know the root account. I don't know any privilege account. But when I said I want a session, this is where the just-in-time kicks in. Now, the Netwrix Privilege Secure product has connected to that system, provisioned an account with the right level of access, so I can have sudo access on that system, and now it's made it available to me. I can click this, and you can see it launches a PuTTY session where now I have access. It's created an account, so I'm not logged in as root. I have an appropriately created new account with the right access, and everything I'm doing now is being securely monitored. So let's say I come to this incognito session over here, and I'm going to log in as my administrator account and do my MFA, of course. Copy that. Yes, yes, allow. Okay, so now I'm logged into Netwrix Privilege Secure as an administrator. So same product, same URL, but I get a different view. I can see I have an active session here. There's an active SSH session from Michael to my host in Azure. I can actually click this and see a live view of the session. Every command that was issued, you can see the exact command here, the response, and if I come here, you can see as I'm typing, whoops, everything's viewed live here. I'm going to exit this session, and you can see it said the session was complete. That is available to rewatch as a recording. And if I had wanted to, I could have ended that session, locked that session, and put extra security controls in place. So what this has done is given a secure way to control all access to your target systems, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem. And while I focused on VMs, it actually does more than that. You can see as the administrator, I've set up these resources in my lab. I've got the Linux server here, some Windows there, but I could easily add other Azure Active Directory tenants, websites. So this has a browser extension where you can do the same exact thing for web applications, list of servers, databases, if you wanted to secure your databases like SQL and Oracle. There's a whole lot that you can do with this product with the goal of providing secure privilege access to your end users across all of your data, hybrid, on-prem, in the cloud. So, that's one very powerful thing you can do to secure your environment, and with the just-in-time privilege, make sure you've got no lateral movement pathways for attackers to take advantage of. So that was just a quick demo of a couple of the things that Netwrix can do. There's certainly a lot more, but I thought those two would be a good starting point. And next steps, we've got some resources here that you can scan or that will be available for you when we send over the recording or the deck. We have a hybrid security trends report, so focused on what we see out there and how you can better secure your hybrid data. You can get a free trial of Netwrix Auditor that you saw today. Very easy to get up and running. And then you can read some of our articles there, like our Cyber Chief Magazine article. So that was what I wanted to cover today, and leave a little bit of time for Q&A before we wrap up. It is Halloween after all. So at this point, if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Jeff, great presentation. I'm just fielding the questions coming in. We just received one. It says when establishing a PAM extension. Let me expand this. I can't really read this. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. When establishing a PAM session, the account is created on demand. How is that licensed in Azure?
Yeah, sure. So in Azure, you've got a couple of options. So if you don't want to have additional users being created for your user license account, what the product also supports, and I think is more commonly done with customers, is you take the existing Azure account and you do the dynamic role mapping. So if you used Azure PIM, a similar concept to that, where they would request their account gets elevated to the global administrators or whatever particular role for the duration of that session. You would click the activity in a browser extension, it launches a new tab, it puts the user in that role. Only in that new tab, they can access it. Once that tab's exited, that role gets removed. And that way you're not increasing users. You can also use the option that will create a brand new user account and map that to a role. And then that account will be deleted when it's done. So it really shouldn't have a net impact on licensing. But I have seen it done both ways.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. While we're waiting for another question to come in, and Patrick said thank you for, seems like you answered this question. So awesome. Perfect. That's what we like to hear. As far as, most of us, right, we own Office 365, E3, E5 license, what have you. There's some out of the box security, right, that we can apply in the organization, but where does your company kind of fill the gap there?
Yep. So I would say two different ways I see it most common. There's your really mostly Azure, but your E3 and all those E5 security capabilities are kind of pay gated off from you. So we can offer a lot of what you get there from an E5 license, especially around the data identity infrastructure security, without having to pay some of the exorbitant costs that might come associated with that. Or maybe you're already E5 for other reasons. Where our value comes in there is providing visibility across hybrid. So you get your Azure and your on-prem and multi-cloud. So you can go beyond Azure. A lot of the Microsoft offerings are really focused on Azure. And they've started to branch out beyond that a little bit, but it's pretty light. If you've got endpoints that aren't Windows, you might not have a lot of luck with some of their endpoint security. If you've got VMs that are in EC2, you might not have a lot of luck with that. So extending that to a hybrid, heterogeneous IT infrastructure.
Makes sense. Thanks so much, Jeff. So we got a question from Tyler. He says, how do you recommend staying on top of all the UI, config, rebranding changes Microsoft makes to Purview, Azure, etc.? Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's difficult. So, I've been following that since it was the Secure Islands that got acquired by Microsoft. And, now with the most recent rebrand, it kind of brought together two different offerings from Microsoft into one with Purview. We actually recently engaged a former Gartner analyst and employee of Microsoft to help us, break down all of exactly what goes where. It does require like almost a full-time resource on our side, keeping up with the changes. Our Azure product manager spends most of their time doing that, and we also are part of the early adopter program with Microsoft. So we just got access to their beta APIs for some of the new labeling capabilities that are out. So we also devote some of our resources to exploring the new APIs before they're out so that we can try to learn it from the ground up as well. So there's no easy way to keep up with it. It changes pretty quick.
Yeah, no cookie cutter approach there, but thanks, Jeff. And Tyler says, terrific. Thank you for that answer. We got another question from Patrick. It says, on your monitoring dashboard, you showed what did what and when. How is that compliant with GDPR and privacy concerns in Europe?
Yep. So, and I'll give two sides of that answer. One, our product is actually used by a lot of customers who have to comply with GDPR. because when you want to answer questions such as, I just got this data subject access request, I need to know where all this individual's data is spread out across my organization, our scanning can help answer that question. And you can look up a particular user and see where their name is referenced in documents, spreadsheets, databases across the organization. Now, the logs you saw, the second part, you saw logs with people's names and things like that. So yes, our product will store, just like any SIM or SOAR or other product, account names who performed activities. You can selectively choose to delete that information for a particular account if you got a request to be forgotten for a particular individual, but that does with audit logs and event logs, I think that's a debated topic of exactly the right way to do that, because some of it is considered forensic evidence. But either way, that option is there, and I think many organizations out there use our products to help comply and stay compliant with GDPR.
Perfect. Yeah, it's no easy task, right?
Yeah.
With all the different regulations and now all these AI concerns and things like that. Not to put you on the spot, Jeff, but I think the White House, right? It released its AI directive yesterday. I think it's like 68 pages or what have you. Do you see any impact to your company on that and development and things like that? Things to be aware of?
Yeah, well, I think we're all consumers of AI, and even at our organization, as we explore ways to adopt AI, it's going to be using services like Azure, OpenAI, and other things. So a lot of the White House directive is putting good policies in place, like these large organizations, they can't grade their own homework. They've got to be verified by the government that all the security checks and tests that they're doing are legitimate. And that's only going to benefit all of us. So it is a new frontier. For example, we don't allow anybody to use AI generated code in any of our products because that's still a debated area around intellectual property rights. So, we all, I think, are testing the boundaries of what makes sense for AI use. But we are actively exploring, the best ways to use AI in our services. And I think what the White House is doing is only going to benefit us and other consumers to kind of hold people accountable.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great answer. It'd be interesting to see what happens and the rest of this year into 2024. Exciting times in the field of tech and development and privacy and what have you. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions at this time, but of course, feel free to reach out to Jeff anytime. His information is there on the slide, jeff.warren@netwrix.com. And listen, as we wrap up, we want to thank you so much for attending today. And again, thank you so much, Jeff and Netwrix for supporting this webinar, for delivering that informative presentation. It was amazing, and definitely give us some things to think about. And we hope to see everyone on a future ARMA webinar. And a quick reminder, access to the recording of today's slides will be in a follow-up email from Zoom. And those of you who are IGPs, there'll be IGP credit details will be included in that email with the recording. If you have any additional questions, please email us at education@armainternational.org, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.